Welcome back. This is my 2021 Yamaha YZ250FX, and today I'm going to be changing out all the linkage bearings. I thought this would be a good opportunity to make a video about the various ways you can change these bearings. They've got 140 hours on them, so I'm going to go ahead and change them as preventative maintenance. First, I'm going to remove the lower shock bolt and these two bolts connecting the linkage. Next, I'm going to remove this lower chain roller to make it easier to access this nut to this linkage piece. I'm going to start with the bearings in this part of the lower linkage. If you were just taking these apart to grease them, you would want to make sure this was all really clean before you took anything apart. But in this case, I'm replacing all these bearings, so I'm not really concerned with that at this point. Now I'll start by removing these caps, the seals, and the washer under there, as well as the bushing. So I've cleaned this up a little bit so you can see what's going on inside. This is the bearing on the inside. And in this first example, I'm going to use a press to remove these. Now I've rummaged through all my tools and found this socket. This socket is just slightly smaller than that bearing. So I'm going to use the socket to press that bearing out of the housing. This is an 18mm socket. That's not really what's important though. What's important is that it's slightly smaller than the bearing so that you can press the bearing out, but you don't damage the housing. Now that I've got some tension on that, I'm going to put a little bit of heat on this housing to expand the aluminum and make it easier to get the bearing out. Alright, so we got those bearings out with the press, and for the other one, I'm going to use a bench vise and show you how to do it with a bench vise. Now this is pretty much the same process, except I'm going to use this large socket as a spacer on the back side. Alright, put a little tension on it, and give it some heat. Alright, now those bearings are out and I'm ready to clean this up and reinstall new ones. The bearings that I'm installing are part of this All Balls Racing linkage bearing kit. I like these bearing kits because they come with the lower shock bearing. And not all these kits come with that lower shock bearing, but this one does. So that's pretty nice. It comes with the bushing and the bearing for the lower shock. I'll put a link to this linkage bearing kit in the video description. So I put a thin layer of grease in here and I'm ready to press these bearings back in. I forgot to note during filming that each bearing has one side with a rounded edge and one side with a more flat edge. When installing the bearing, the rounded edge goes in first and you press on the flat edge. Alright, those are in using the press. I'm going to put these back in with a bench vise just to complete that demonstration. Reinstalling these bearings on the Vise is going to be a similar process to removing them. I do have an aluminum soft jaw cover for this back part so that I don't damage this aluminum piece when I press this back in. Again, I'm going to use a socket that's slightly larger so it'll bottom out and I'll know when the bearing is at the right depth. And I'm just going to press it in. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and finish getting this assembled, but before I do, I'm gonna add a little bit more grease in here. I'm being careful not to dislodge any of these needle bearings because they're only held in by the friction and the grease. All right, I don't want to forget to put my washers in before I put my grease seals in. Yes, I've done that before. All right, that piece is ready. Next, I'm going to work on the bearings in this lower linkage arm. To do that, I'm going to use this slide hammer bearing puller set. I got this kit from Harbor Freight, but I'll put a link in the video description to a kit like this on Amazon. I'm going to go ahead and remove the bushing and the seals. So these bearings can't be pushed through to the other side, so that's why I'm going to use that slide hammer bearing puller set. I'm going to insert the puller adapter so that this ridge grabs the bottom of that bearing. All right, now that I've got some heat in there, I'm just going to make sure it's still tight. Install my slide hammer and pull it out. That's one. That's the quickest and easiest way I know to pull the bearings in this linkage arm without damaging anything. Like I said, I'll put a link to that kit in the video description. All right, while I'm over here at the Vise, I'll use it to reinstall these bearings. Got that side in. Alright, got the new ones reinstalled now. Now I'm going to put a little extra grease in here, then I'm going to install my new seals and the new bushing. Alright, that's all set. Now I've got all these bearings replaced with new ones, and the only one left to do is the lower shock mount. So to remove this bearing, I'm going to be using some sockets to press it out just like I did with the others. But in this case, instead of using a bench vise or a press, I'm going to be using this bolt. So I think once I get started, it'll make more sense. But before I do that, I need to measure the distance here to make sure that I put the new bearing in and that the new bearing is centered. So I'm going to use my digital caliper to measure the offset here. It's 4.35 on this side. It's 4.35 millimeters from this side to the edge, and on the other side it's 4.28. I already measured that, so I just need to get it really close to centered when I put the new one in. I'm going to be pushing this bearing out that way. So this socket is large enough for the bearing to fall into. And I'm going to use this one to push it out. There's the bearing. Now I'll put the new one in the same way. I'm going to have to stop and check, see where I'm at, make sure I've got the bearing centered. So I'm going to have to do this a couple of times. And as I can tell, it needs to go a little further just by looking at it. I'm going to install my new bushing and the seals on both sides. Now I'm just going to reinstall everything, starting with this lower connecting arm. Now I'll reinstall this lower chain roller. I hope this video helped you out in some way, and if it did, please hit the like button, because that really helps me out. I'll put links to all the parts and the tools that I've used today in the video description. If you'd like to see more videos like this one, please subscribe. Thanks for watching.